Hello and good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? Happy Friday to you, and I hope you're ready for a good webinar. This one's going to be on scale. It's an interesting backstory to this. This is the very core roots of land effects going way back. I remember back in the day, when I was about 16, I started going to different architecture offices and optimizing their computers for AutoCAD. That was back, some of them had R12, some of them were still R10 and R11. Um, but every workstation back then, it just astounded me. It was typically be a little sticky note right on the monitor. You'd see this sticky note on the monitor, and it would be the little cheat sheet for text. And so if you wanted to put 1/8 inch text into a plan at 20 scale, and so I like one of those things I can't even remember what is that. It was like 3 feet 6 inches tall or something like that. Um, and it would have all those different height there for your most common text heights at your most common scales. And anyways, my dad and I started on what became land effects. That was literally the very first thing that we did. So the summer of 1992 is where a lot of what you're going to see here first started. And because it was just as simple as, well, I've got to put stuff into AutoCAD and I need it scaled. It's just that simple. And we would certainly like to think it is so simple that you end up, like I said, you just unlearn the craziness that you've had to learn on how to do it otherwise. So it's going to be pretty fun. And even if you are experienced with land effects, we've got a couple of little things in here that you may not be aware of, but this is definitely very much a more beginner level webinar for people who are just new to it and want to see how to work with scale and how to do it correctly. Feel free to type in your questions there on the bottom left. We already got a great question and would love to have more that we will get to. And you got a little chat area too. It's fun to chat amongst yourselves to kind of share techniques with each other. But if you want particularly us to answer your question, just be sure it goes in that question box on the left. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this on over to Amanda.
Thanks, Jeremiah. And thank you everybody again for coming in and spending a little part of your Friday, or if you're watching the recording, whatever day this happens to be for you. Like Jeremiah said, we're going to be going through a lot of the basics of scale to break it all down. But I'm also going to throw in a few tips and tricks in here so that even if you're an experienced LandFX and CAD user, you're going to come away with a gold nugget of information out of this one. So we'll just basically start off with where we're going to go with this. I'm going to really quickly show you just kind of a really quick example of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to go into setting, kind of breaking it down step by step. How do you work with scale so that you can understand exactly what LandFX is doing for you, so that later it just becomes kind of old hat knowledge. You just go about your business. You basically don't need to think about it anymore. And then moving on to a few more advanced items as we go along. Scale is basically what AutoCAD is all about, just like Jeremiah said. At some point, you're going to have to plot what you've drawn, and you're not going to plot it at 1-to-1. That would be obviously very crazy. So you're going to have to scale things. However, you want to draw in AutoCAD at 1-to-1, you want to plot smaller, you're going to have to translate at some point. Every landscape and designer and landscape architect knows this, but AutoCAD's not entirely intuitive, as each and every one of you have probably already figured out on your own. When it comes to scale, even I struggled making scale work in paper space and with labels in university and my first few months of working. Just because it involves a lot of calculations, either like Jeremiah said, on a sticky note attached to your screen or in your head, or just memorizing different things you need to do to make a viewport scale work. All of that All of those kinds of things is where land effects enters the picture. Whereas AutoCAD forces you to make those complex scale calculations or to have very detailed templates to help you through your workflow, land effects takes on that responsibility for you. You still need to tell land effects what you want it to do, just like any other program, but once you set it, it's set and you're good. So just down here, you can see basically this is the button we're going to be focusing a lot on today. It's one simple button, but it can do so much depending on how you use it. So now let's get to the good stuff. How you can really do some interesting things in Scale with land effects. So we'll start off here. I've got this great drawing already going on. You can see I've got some labels already in here. It's kind of all set up, but I want to show you, other than the labels and all of that, what is it that land effects is doing with your scale. I've already set a scale in here, everything's set. So basically I'm just going to put in just a little bit of a text item. So I'm going to go up here into my FX site. I'm going over to my leaders. I'm going to choose a leader. We have all these great ones that you can choose from, and I'm going to choose a leader with text. Now, if you go through actual AutoCAD, and this is going to look a little different for some of you, but if you go into your Annotate tab and you go into some of the leader options that you have in here, you're going to have to figure out the scale, you're going to have to set the height in properties, everything like that. If you go over here to your FX Site tab and go over to your leaders with text, you have a few options in terms of the leader. Let's just go with a simple leader with text here. And it's going to ask me for my arrow point. I'm going to point to this tree right here. And you can see it's already even scaling the arrow point to the scale that I've set. I've set it to 1 to 300 in metric. We will be going through both metric and imperial in this drawing. But basically, I'm just going to put that right here, and we're going to pull it over. And I'm going to kind of insert my text here. It wants me to type it out. It won't let me copy. Let's type it out then. So I'm just going to give it a final tree locations to be marked out and approved. Basically a standard kind of note that you would put in here. And it's already scaled this. This isn't quite the It's already scaled it basically to what I want my text size to be in this drawing. I've already set that all up. This is all things that you would do when you're customizing land effects. And now kind of how this works, I'm going to show you if I go over into my paper space. And if I were to do the exact same thing and make a note about the sod on the boulevard, sod over 150 millimeter depth, topsoil. You can see they're the exact same height. And I remember this being a huge thing, especially it was kind of ingrained in me when I was even just learning landscape architecture. You need to have the text in model space match any text you put in paper space. It needs to match the same kind of size of the text in your schedules. All of that needs to match because that's just a kind of a design layout typography kind of thing. You don't want to have too many hierarchies of text. If you have the same text at 2 inches and then some of it at 1/2 inch and some of it at 1/4 inch, and it's all the same, it's supposed to be all the same level of text, it's still going to read differently in a hierarchy. You want to control your hierarchy, and that's what land effects is giving you, an ability so that on the things that matter, you don't need to worry about what height the text is at, what size the arrow leader is at, all of these things. So we're going to kind of break this down exactly how this works, what it works with, and what you can basically forget about from now on. There's a lot of things we're going to be going over that I I almost forget how to do it originally at this point because it's just become so easy. So let's kind of move on from there. Other kind of things that you can do in here. So I've kind of set a text here, but I can actually set a new kind of text. So I have, speaking of hierarchies, I have a street name label here. And I remember before what I used to do is I would have at the side of my title block over here, I'd have a list of all of my text hierarchies over here, and it would say street name, it would say note, and all of that, and I would copy it from here, copy it over to here, and fill it out with the street name. There's a little bit easier and more intuitive way of doing that. I can just go up here to my text. And I can create, you can see I have all of these styles available. I can create my street name text right here so that if you're a CAD manager in your office or just a manager in general, and you're trying to explain to somebody else how you want, like what text you want used for your street name, just tell them to go to the Land Effects text tool and choose the street name text. So I'm going to go ahead and make a street name text by typing new. I'm going to call it street name. And we're going to say OK. And I'm going to give it a style. I'm actually going to choose Arial. And then I'm going to give it a point size. And this is the biggest thing about Land Effects and Scale here. We're not talking height of text in the drawing. And the reason we're not talking height of text and we're instead talking point size is because the end goal is how big is it on the piece of paper at the end. And you want it to be consistent. So the way to be consistent on a piece of paper is just like if you were using a word processor, you'd use point size. You wouldn't use it's 3 meters tall in the drawing or a quarter inch on the sheet or something like that. You wouldn't kind of go that way. You would think, oh, well, standards of typography is 12 point is very legible. And for something I want bold, like a street name, I might go something a little bigger, like 18 point. And so that's very familiar, easy to kind of work with, and doesn't involve too much math in your head. You've already got the point sizes from Word format already kind of solidified in your head in terms of, you know, how big 18 point is going to turn out on the page. So we'll go with that. You can set it to a layer. I won't, but that's basically what you're going to end up with. So I'm going to go ahead and say mtext. And yes, I want to update that street name definition. So when I made a change, I changed it to Arial and I changed the point size. It's going to ask me to update it. So I'm going to say yes. And we're going to put this in. So now I can just tell anybody, use the street name text, and it's right there ready to put anywhere in the drawing. And I always know it's going to be the right size. So very easy things to work with. Now let's kind of go right back to the beginning, and we're going to, how did we get to this point? So I'm going to start with kind of an imperial drawing, and we're going to jump a little bit between metric and imperial, but not too much, don't worry. I'm going to try and stick with one or the other for significant amounts of time, so we won't jump too bad. So you can't have scale without units is the first thing about this. In this webinar, we're going to follow two streams. Like I said, I'm going to go with decimal feet and I'm going to go with meters. If you are normally using architectural inches, don't worry, everything I say for decimal feet and actually for meters is also going to apply for you. If you use centimeters or millimeters, don't worry, everything I do for meters, it's going to apply to you. It's going to be very easy to follow. No worries there. I'm going to be, again, jumping back and forth. mostly to show how, illustrate how easy this is. I have worked in both metric and imperial, but and I know how to convert between the two, but I don't need to, is the point here. There's no math involved. A good habit to get into to start off with is to not blindly trust the units window. So I'm going to pull up the units window here. And it says decimal feet, which is what this drawing is, I think it's in, but an important thing, it might say inches, and it could be actually drawn in feet. I've seen this so many times. It always happens, especially when you get something in from a consultant, or you're dealing with an old drawing that something wonky happened to it. Happens all the time. Don't trust the units window. Double check it. So how do you double check it? I'm going to say OK to this, and I'm actually going to draw a line. So I'm going to go a polyline, and I'm just going to draw it over here. And I'm going to draw it 9 units long. That's usually the number that we stick with, mostly because it's far enough apart that you can easily tell if it's 9 inches, 9 meters, 9 feet. It's going to be very clear. So if I type 9, you can see very clearly here, yep, that's about 9 feet compared to the width of the road and the size of the tree and other things in the drawing. Maybe you have a known dimension, you can do that. But important here, especially for imperial feet and inches users, is when I'm drawing this, I am not typing 9 and the foot mark, because then it is going to be 9 feet. I'm just typing 9, and that means it's going to go with whatever the default units are, and it will be very clear that it's just a little baby line here if it's actually in inches, and then if it is in inches, you can go in here and just switch it around to be what it should be. Now that I know what my inches, or that it is actually in feet, I'm going to go ahead and set the scale. So this is back here. You can find the scale button in the FX admin ribbon, or it's also located in the FX planting ribbon as well, if you're trying to look for it. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to kind of stick in the FX admin ribbon as much as I can, just for the purposes of this webinar, and I'm going to set the scale. Now I've already kind of set the scale in this one, but we're going to go through this window. So it says Viewport Scale. You'll notice I am in model space. What it means is you're setting it for what you want the viewport scale to be. That way, it relates to once you move into paper space. So usually what I'll do before I actually set the scale in the drawing is I'll actually set up my paper space over here, and I'll figure out what I want my scale to be. So I've worked out this viewport, and we'll go through this in a little bit of detail of how I did that. But you can see over here, I've already set this viewport to be 1 inch equals 30 feet. It fits very nice in this viewport. Okay, so I know what I want my scale to be. I go back, I go into scale, and I set it to that scale and press OK. If you're working, obviously we have all of these options for you to choose from. You wouldn't be setting it to 1:1 because you're not going to be printing to 1:1, hopefully. But you're just going to type it in and then say OK. And that's it. And now your scale is set and you can start putting things in. So we're going to make a quick jump over to metric, and we're going to kind of go through that again in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make a quick presentation transition and use, if you haven't used UCS, I very much recommend you go to our work areas webinar that we did 2 weeks ago. And I've already set up a UCS in here. Separate from a work area though, so you don't need to use a work area. So here I have set up my drawing, and I'm going to be doing this section of first of this planting plan. We've already covered work areas in another plan. If you're wondering about how to separate out the rest of these, again, that's recorded on our website. We're going to be focusing on just this section though. So as I go over to my sheet, You'll see I don't have a viewport yet, so I need to set that up. I'm going to go ahead and pull in a viewport. Oh, and before I do all of that, I'm going to go back and check my units. Yep, decimal meters, okay, and I'm going to draw a line and just check, and we're going to type just 9, and yeah, that's meters. Definitely not millimeters or centimeters or inches or feet. Okay, so back to here, back on track. I'm going to grab my viewport. There we go. And I'm going to put that on my viewport layer. Great. And it's not scaled yet, but luckily I am on the right UCS because I switched UCSs before creating this viewport. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to zoom in on here, kind of roughly the area, but you'll notice I still just have a custom scale down here and not a standard scale yet. So I still need to set that to a standard scale. Now, if you've done this before using just AutoCAD, and I remember when I used to need to remember how to set a viewport manually, it used to always be a fun time with math. Now I don't need to do that. So I'm just going to go up to back over to FX admin, over to scale. I'm going to make sure I'm inside and making the viewport active so the border is thick. I'm going to click scale. I'm going to set it to what I want it to be. I don't want it to be 1 to 300. That's going to be huge. Let's try it out. I don't know. I'm going to say okay. It's going to ask me if I want to set my active viewport scale, and I'm going to say okay. That might be a little bit small. Let's try it again. This is how easy it is. Let's try 1 to 250. Yes. That looks much better. Okay. So I'm going to set it to around there where my page divider is. I'm going to go in here and you can see my standard scale is now 1 to 250. If I were to print this out and check it with a scale ruler, it will be 1 to 250 for sure. Now, granted, I say for sure with the assumption that you set this page up correctly. To set the page up correctly, definitely recommend you watch our sheet setup webinars. That's over here under, if I go under here and go to webinars, I can even just type sheet setup and find it in here. So I have sheet setup and I have metric sheet setup. I recommend watching both. Besides just different units and different voices, Jake and I, they actually go through different workflows. One relates more to blocks, metric relates more to XREFs, and they both have different kind of tips and tricks in them as well. Recommend watching both to make sure that your layout page is set up correctly so that scale will actually work. Okay, so I've set all of this up. Let's kind of make that a bit closer. And now I know what my scale is going to be. It's going to be 1 to 250. I'm going to go back here to model space and get rid of this. This toolbar always pops over when I don't want it to pop over. And today it doesn't want to pop back. We'll work with it. We'll go back to model space. I'll double check. Okay, yep, my scale's set to 1 to 250. Great. Now, that's all kind of set up. And I'm ready to go with my metric, and I'm ready to go with my imperial. My units are correct, and my scale is set up. Let's go back to imperial. So here in imperial, I'm going to show you kind of the things that you can scale with. So I'm going to just go with some callouts, some hatches, some dimensions. All of these scale with the scale that you set. So again, our scale in this drawing is 1 to 30 in the Imperial. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place a callout, plant callout. Great, it's all scaled correctly. We'll go with a group. Oops, went a little too fast there. There we go. All scaled the same. And it's all going to match the normal scale that I would have on any other drawing at any scale. It's all going to print the same size on the sheet of paper. I can go and place under FX Site, I have a few reference notes in here. I can place a site call out. And the leader arrow size and the relative size of the callout is going to match with the callouts of the plant. You can see that the arrow size is the same for both. I'm also going to place a dimension. So maybe I want to show what the dimension is on my street. So I can go over to FX Site. I'm going to go over to my dimensions. I'm going to grab that, and I'm going to shift right click to get, if you haven't used that, it's really great to grab a temporary snap for nearest. And I'm going to pop on my O snap to get a perpendicular snap here, which I have set normally. And I'll just place my dimension right there, and it's already scaled to the same size that I expect on my page. And I apologize if I keep saying that, but that's the truth. And we'll keep going. We'll place a hatch. I'll go in here. I have all of my hatches. They all have a predetermined scale, so that when I place it here, it will scale itself to my 1 to 30 hatch. I'm just going to draw one, maybe around this. I'll shift right click, grab nearest snap. Oh. We'll just draw it. Maybe I want, this hatch around my picnic bench, and I'll right click to close it. And that hatch is the scale. It will always look the same size once I go to paper. I'll just put that behind, send it back. And I might just change that hatch over to a screened color, just so it's not so obtrusive. There we go, when it prints. So hatches scale, let's keep going. Let's put just a text box. We'll put a street name back here. So if you recall, I set my street name up in the metric drawing, actually, but I happen to be using the same preference set on this Imperial drawing as well. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If you do jump between metric and Imperial, you'll have to try that out. It will work in this case. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say I want my street name text, and you can see it's already set to Arial. I'll go in here and put that in. And it's the same size as it was before based on this scale. So all of these items are all placed in, and we'll go over to our paper space and just kind of prove, yes, it's all the exact same. If I go here and I place this in, it's going to be the same size as over there. If I were to, if you haven't seen this already, you can actually label in paper space as well. If you're inside the active viewport and you have under your planting, move to paper space under labels placed within a viewport, I can actually just grab a label here, and it's going to be the exact same size as these two over here because they're sized to the piece of paper. So everything like that, it's all kind of coming together. Let's yeah, let's move over into meters and we'll kind of show a few more things. So if I go back to meters, I'm in my drawing here. I can place a new planting area, and planting areas also use hatch, so they're also going to scale. So I'm going to go over here, go to shrub areas. I'm going to place a little bit more of this rosemary into this planting plan, and I'm just going to draw that by tapping D. You can see in my options, I had an option to just draw the area, so I'm just going to do that. And we're going to place it in here. And right click to close, and it's already scaled based on what it should be, and the line type is also scaled appropriately for the scale. Everything's kind of all together. You don't need to worry about it. I can go ahead and call that out. And I can also, this is another cool feature that we have in here, we have dim scale blocks. And they're located here in Discipline Graphics. They're different than the blocks that you have for your plan graphics or your generic plants. If you place a plan graphic or a generic plant, and we look in here, I'll just grab a barbecue and edit that, you'll see that they are set to, that one's set to dim scale. Let's go benches, there we go. They're going to be set to 1:1, but under discipline graphics, if I go here, you can see that if I go to, we'll go to civil, and I'm going to grab a fire hydrant here under utilities. These are also set to dim scale here. And what that means, if it's set to dim scale as opposed to 1:1, it's going to scale with the scale that you have. So it's always the same symbol size when you place it on the page. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to place that. And it's going to be a certain symbol size. We'll just put it right here on the page. And again, if I move over into paper space and I place that same dim scale block, it's going to be the exact same size in paper space. You can see this is in paper space, that isn't, it's in model space. And they're the exact same size. Everything's going to scale appropriately in this case. Now, I wouldn't place that plant hatch in paper space, so I'm not going to show you that. We're going to move on as well with this into some more advanced things. I hope you guys kind of got a handle on the basics of how scale is working between model space and paper space, and how you basically, as long as you set the scale correctly and you make sure your units are correct and everything's great from the start, it's set and forget kind of situation. However, let's see if we have any questions kind of on those basics so far in the meantime. Jeremiah, do we have anything on it?
We got no questions on the basics. We got a few people who were asking about what you're just about to get into, which is great, which is let's get into work areas and multiple scales. So perfect timing.
Excellent. Okay, so we're already in the drawing I want to be in. Basically, in this drawing, obviously in a lot of scenarios, you're going to come across you need more than one scale on a single layout sheet. And in this case, for this drawing, that's exactly what's happening here. I have this area down here. Maybe it's a little too small to, I want to show more detail in it because the planting's really intricate, or the hardscape is really intricate. I want to kind of point out all the little spaces, areas that have different kinds of pavers. I want to show this at a bigger scale. Sorry, and I need to also have the callouts and everything come out at the, well, like a 1:100 scale for this instead of the 1:250 that we have. Or if you're in Imperial, you might be going for more of a 1:10 instead of a 1:30, or a 1:20 instead of a 1:30, anything like that. You want two different scales, one layout space. Obviously, you need to stay in the same drawing for that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use work areas. And if you watched the work area webinar 2 weeks ago, you got a preview of what I'm about to do, but we're going to show it off with some other cool things in it as well. So I'm going to go over here and back into modeled space. I've got this area set up that I want to be my 1 to 100 area. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up as a work area. And from the other webinar about work areas are a way to differentiate one area from the rest of your drawing. In this case, we're going to do it for scale. So I'm going to go into my FX admin, and here I have new work area. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to call this enlargement. And you may notice that the work area window has changed a little bit, and this offers a lot more opportunities in terms of what you might be able to do. I know the questions that we had kind of had to deal with being able to freeze and unfreeze things at different points. And so that's one thing that we're kind of implementing and testing out is this layer suffix, so that anything placed in here will get a suffix. I'm not going to show that off right now because it's still being worked out, and it doesn't, we don't really need it for this exact example. So I'm just going to leave it at naming the work area. I'm going to say OK. And you can either draw the work area now, or I'm going to use the select option that you see down here in the command line by typing S and pressing enter. And now it allows me to select a polyline. I'm going to go ahead and select this one. And great, turned it into a work area. It's on the work area layer. If you have an older installation, that layer might be named differently, but as long as it matches with your preference set, you're all good to go. And so, great, we have a work area. Well, now we need to set it to the other scale. So we have a world scale, which is right now at 1 to 250 in this metric drawing. And we also want a work area scale. So I'm going to press the scale button again. And I'm going to go down to, I'm going to need this at about 1 to 100. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to assign it to this work area, because normally when you set a scale, when we set the scale before, it just set it. But now that we have a work area in the drawing, now it's asking us if we want to choose that work area. I'm going to say, yes, I want to choose the work area. I'm going to select it. And it's assigned the 1 to 100 scale to this work area. Now, if I were to label these plants, and I'll just go to a group label, we'll grab that one. You can see the label is a lot smaller here than what we had been using before. This one compared to that label over here. It also, if we were to put a fire hydrant in this area, let's go ahead and do that. Over here, and we're going to go to civil utilities hydrant. This is also going to be a lot smaller because it's supposed to pop up at the same size on the piece of paper, so it's legible at the same size. So if I go back over to my area, I'm going to create a new viewport. And set that to my viewport layer. And I'm going to go inside. And we're just going to go over here. And I'm actually going to have to set it to the right, the right UCS. I'm going to restore that UCS again. Great. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to set it to that 1 to 100. I'm going to set this viewport now to that 1 to 100 scale. And again, Imperial, same thing. You would do the exact same thing as I'm doing, just with using these Imperial units instead. I'm going to go to 1 to 100 and OK. Yes. Great. Okay. So that's basically my viewport set. So this one's now set at a 1 to 100 scale, and this one's set at a 1 to 250. We're just going to double check in here. Perfect. Okay. And I'm going to lock this viewport. And I'm also going to make sure that this one is also locked. Great. And I'm going to actually move that that label down a bit so that you can see it. I'll go over here to planting and use the group label to move that down just a little bit so we can see it over into here. If you missed that, I chose group label, I clicked on the label and right-clicked to accept to bypass reassigning it, and it just allowed me to move it. I could go over here, and so you can see that even though this one, I'll go back to model space. In model space, if I copy this and compare it to this label, they are much different in size. But when I go over here to paper space, you can see they are the exact same size on paper space. So that's where the scale magic is happening here. Same with the fire hydrant. Same size, same size. If we go into text, I could do this forever, guys. But basically, and then if you want to start graying things out, you can start using your, up here in FX admin, you can start using new viewport, or you could use the layer suffix in the work area to start freezing the scale of those items that are at that scale inside the viewport. Everything like that you can start doing. So as you add more viewports, you can set more scales on this drawing. I just showed you one with an enlargement, but you could have a road network just like this one that goes along, and you have many multiple scales as you have different segments along the drawing. In the future, just look out for improvements to setting an enlargement viewport inside another viewport, and that also has a scale set. You can also place work areas in an X reference if needed for this one. So if you have kind of a few scales and the work areas are starting to overlap, it's becoming a little bit busy, you can also create a blank drawing with just work areas in there and reference it into here, and the scale will work the same through the X reference. Just make sure that the XREF is set on the layer for work areas. So instead of putting an X reference on an X reference layer, you would put it on the same layer as you have for work area. So you would assign the X reference to the L work area layer, or whatever layer your work areas are coming in on. I believe the other one was LP Anno border was the old one if you have an old installation. Both will work. Just make sure that it's set to that, and any X-referenced work areas will be included in all of this. Let's move back over to Imperial, and we're going to go into a little bit of a different kind of scenario, more advanced scenario with scale, and that is the inevitable, I need to change my scale. Something happened. The municipality got back to you, and they want the scale to be bigger, or they want it to be smaller, because they like to, sometimes they like to direct you around, or maybe you're new kind of working with that municipality, and you're still kind of feeling out the standards for what they normally expect. But regardless, you need to make a new scale. You need to rescale all of this. And you may have done quite a few labels actually. So that's kind of a problem. You're facing a scenario of having to relabel everything, which you definitely don't want to do. We have some solutions for this, and we're going to go over them. So first off, in this scenario, my scale is 1 to 30. I need to change it to 1 to, what am I going to be able to fit on the page? We'll do 1 to 20. So I need to change this to 1 to 20. Well, I have a dimension, I have a California Avenue, I have a reference note, I have a call out, all of these things that need to rescale. So basically what I'm going to do is just go over here and go back to scale, and I'm going to go to change this to 1 inch equals 20 feet, and I'm going to rescale the objects. So this is an important button to press only if you want to rescale your objects. And when you do this, just keep in mind that what it's not going to do is figure out everything in the drawing and change it to 1 to 20, or 1 foot equals 20 feet, or 1 inch equals 20 feet. It won't take all the callouts and change it to that. What it's going to do instead is figure out the difference between 1 inch equals 30 feet and 1 inch equals 20 feet and scale everything based on that difference. So that's important because you might have other scales in your drawing and it will rescale them too, all of the callouts to those other scales, and we'll go through that kind of scenario. But first, I'm just going to rescale this. I'm going to say okay, and it's going to rescale everything. Everything got a little bit smaller, and I can change it back. I can go back to 1 to 30. I'll show you that again. Rescale, okay, and everything gets bigger. Really easy to do. Let's go back to the metric example though, where I had this enlargement. I don't want, when I want to rescale this area to, let's go to 1 to 300 instead. If I rescale the world, it will rescale the work area as well. So I'm going to kind of go around that, and I'm going to use some other tricks I have up my sleeve. So I'm going to go to scale. I'm going to change the world scale back to 1 to 300, and I'm not going to check rescale objects. I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to say entire drawing for the world, and you can see it changed the work area. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to change the work area back to 1 to 100. Great. But now my world is set to a different scale. So I'm going to go ahead and call out a different plant here. We'll just call out this low grouping. And you can see my call out is now bigger. So I'm going to make a note of what size that call out is. So it has a scale of 7.62. I'm just going to make a note of that. 7.62 is my new scale, and my old scale is 6.35. Now I'm going to use QSelect to select everything at the old scale. It's only going to be this one because I only did one in here. Actually, it's going to get all the blocks. It'll get this block too, because that should be, yep, that's at 6.35. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go and do QSelect. So that's QSelect, just like that. Press enter. I'm going to go and pick all of my block references. I'm going to go everything with a scale X that equals my old scale, which is 6.35. And I'm going to say OK. Include a new selection set, okay. And it selected these two, hasn't selected my new label, and most importantly, it hasn't selected all of the labels and the dim scale blocks in my enlargement. Now I can just go over into my X and Y scale and change that to the new scale, so that's 7.62. 7.62, and now they're both the right size. And you might need to change some things because this got bigger. If I had more labels, they would probably start overlapping. I can again use the group label tool, right click, and just move them a little further apart if I need to. Easy as pie. Okay, so the last kind of thing I wanted to show in terms of working with scale is scale bars. I'm going to go over here to my metric drawing, and I'm going to go back over to my blocks and my discipline graphics. So discipline graphics, and I'm going to try my scale bars. So I'm in metric. I'm going to grab one of these metric ones, say OK, and I'm going to place this just down here. And it scales to the current scale of the drawing, not necessarily the scale of the area that I have here. I actually need to rescale this. But you can see it fills in automatically for this. If I set my world scale over to 1 to 100 very briefly while I do this, go back to admin, go to scale, set to 1 to 100, don't rescale anything, entire drawing, great. And I go back over to my dim scale blocks and I go north scale and I grab the same one and I just place it in here. Now I have one for 1 to 100. So I have my 1 to 300, I have my 1 to 100, it used the same block. I can now go back over to Imperial and do the exact same thing. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to my dim scale blocks. I'm going to go north scale. I'm going to grab an Imperial one and I'm going to place it. And I've got my 1 inch equals 30 scale block already placed in here, nicely scaled, and so that you can check as soon as you plot that everything is set exactly as you want to. So this is a good spot for questions, and then we'll probably go into just some other little things on scale to kind of wrap the session up. Any good questions kind of come in,
Well, we
Jared?
did, we did get a couple great questions. Primarily just people wowed by you moving the plant label. But Jake and I have sent out that power tip video to remind them of that. So we were able to take care of the questions. So maybe we'll wrap up and then have one last question and answer period after your last bit.
Great. Okay, so you guys have another 5 minutes or so to get in any last questions that you might want to cover. So basically, I wanted to finish this off with a quick mention of this other scale option within AutoCAD, other than the land effects plot scale. There is annotative scale. Now, while annotative scale can be very helpful in very specific situations, I'm going to go ahead and say that nearly all of you shouldn't bother with it. I'm only going to go into it enough for you to recognize when a plan is set to use annotative scaling so that you can remove it. So we're going to kind of move over into this really quick example. My stance on it is if your office knows annotative scale well enough to use it, all you need to know is how to turn land effects anno on and off. If you're asking us how to use annotative scale other than turning it on, you should be turning it off and sticking with land effects scale. That's just based on experience from the technical support side. More often than not, people don't need to use annotative scale. They're just perfectly fine using land effects scale, and introducing annotative scale into things is, if you don't know how to use it, you're going to screw it up. So with that in mind, this drawing is set. This is the command that deals with annotative scaling when it comes to land effects objects, including callouts and leaders and things like that. So if I do that, you can see my annotative scaling is currently on. I'm going to just cancel out of this and show you how you can recognize that your annotative scaling is on and that's the cause of maybe one of your scale issues. Most common causes of scaling issues, units are set incorrectly. Second most common, annotative scaling is turned on. So if I call out this plant tree, we'll go here. You can see it looks okay, but that's because I already have an annotative scale set to 1 to 250. And as I'm placing it, you see that little triangle symbol popping up. That's the symbol saying this is going to be an annotative scaling object. If I hover over it now, I get that symbol. If I look at my properties, I can see annotative is set to yes. If I look at this, I hover over it, it's got an annotative symbol, and down here annotative will be set to yes. Now I can turn off annotative. I can turn it off with this, and it's back, but I can't turn that off. It's grayed out for these callouts. So what you need to do is get rid of this if it's messing up, because most likely you're not using it correctly and you want to go back to just using this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn Land Effects Anno off. Yes. And now it's turned off, but you'll notice if I still label this, this is still annotative, and that's because this block is already defined in this drawing. I need to purge it out and then place it again in order to get rid of the annotation on it. So the way I'm going to do that, you can either delete them and purge it out and then place them again. If you have a large drawing, you already have a lot of labels set, that might be a big setback. Here's a trick to bypass that, and if you ever get into scaling issues or a lot of font issues, call out customization issues, this is the way you're going to fix it. You're going to go into here, you're going to set it to a different symbol, any different symbol. I'm going to remember which one I had set to begin with. I believe I have 8 set. Yep. And so I'm going to go 13. Great. I'm going to say OK. And it's going to change it, and you can see this is now not annotative because I turned Land Effects Anno off. I'm going to run a purge, either the full purge manually, or I can type PRG to do a quick purge. That's a Land Effects tool. It won't be in normal AutoCAD, and then I'm going to go ahead and change this back, and now they're not annotative, and they're going to be the right, well, they're going to be the scale that they were technically set to, although annotative might have been changing it. But that's how you kind of get rid of it. And again, this is not to say that there aren't legitimate circumstances to use annotative scaling, but in my experience, annotative scaling is really complex to learn since it requires well-assembled templates and very well-assembled drawings. And so new hires will most likely have no idea how it works and will likely screw it up into a complete mess on you. It's also very involved to train people on, so for the vast majority of all of you listening to this, forget about it, just use Land Effects. All you need to know is how to turn it off. Okay, so that just about covers everything. How many questions did we get into? Did we need to kind of go over anything else that we went over?
I think, we're basically there. I mean, I would just say in terms of line type scale, particularly with irrigation, Jimmy had a quick question on that, and I just directed him that is really more of an issue of sheet setup, the nature of how LT scale works. So for those of you, and that was our bad for not being sure to be very clear in this webinar. But the nature of how AutoCAD works, line type scale is actually more a factor of your sheet setup rather than what's covered in this webinar. So rather than kind of recapping what's in a lot of those. And then we had another great question and comment and a nice kind of closing thought, especially with what you were just saying on annotative scaling. Rob chimed in with what I would say is the best example of a very absolute good need for annotative scaling. And he's saying in a grading plan, you just get a lot of these little spot elevations, and you very commonly get into a situation where you want the same spot elevation in an overall plan at one scale, and you need a tighter scale with the exact same spot elevations. And that really is a great example, grading plans, because they really do get to be a bit of a mess. And I've seen the scale of those plans change quite a bit in different little viewports and things. And so that's a great example, and that is something that we will be working on with our new and improved grading tools later this year. So that's something to look forward to for a future webinar. So if that, stay on the edge of your seat. But other than that, we did get to those questions. If you have any other further questions that we left you with or you suddenly thought of, you're always welcome to email us and let us know or give us a call. And other than that, hey everybody, do have a great weekend.